Can you imagine a nation ruled by just one man for 20 whole years? Now imagine millions of everyday people all at once deciding enough is enough. Today we're going to dive into the incredible story of how the Philippines went from a dictatorship to a democracy, not through some bloody war, but through the sheer power of its own people.
And that's a huge question, right? For the Philippines, the answer didn't come from guns or violence. It came from this unbelievable display of unity. So let's unpack how millions of ordinary citizens took back their future. All right, so to really get what this revolution was all about, we first have to understand the man and the era that came before it. Our story kicks off with the rise and rule of Ferdinand Marcos.
So who exactly was Ferdinand Marcos? Well, he was a politician who led the Philippines for more than 2 decades. And his rules started out democratically enough, but over time it morphed into this authoritarian regime, one that became infamous for massive corruption and for basically crushing anyone who dared to speak out against it.
You know, when you look at how he got to the top, it seems pretty normal at first. He had a totally legitimate political career, he was winning elections, he was even the first president to get reelected. But then you hit 1972, and boom, that's the game changer. Citing civil unrest, he declares martial law, which gave him almost absolute power. It let him just dismantle all the democratic checks and balances. And get this, even after he officially ended it in 1981, he kept on ruling by decree.
So what was it actually like to live under this regime? Well, it was pretty grim. Political opponents, they were just thrown in jail, often without any real cause. Basic legal rights, like the right to not be in prison forever with a trial, habeas corpus, that was just suspended. The military basically became a tool of the regime. Corruption was everywhere. And as the rich got way richer, the poor just got poorer, which, of course, fueled this growing insurgency out in the countryside. So you've got this iron-fisted regime, a population that's being held down. It really seems like an unbreakable system, right? But then, one single event happened, and it became the entire nation's turning point. This was the moment everything, and I mean everything, changed. The main opposition leader, Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr., he was Marcos's biggest critic. He decided to finally return to the Philippines after years in exile. The second he stepped off the plane, he was shot and killed. This assassination was meant to silence the opposition for good, but it did the exact opposite. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire.
And for the public, there was zero doubt. People saw this as a government-ordered hit, plain and simple. I mean, it was such a brazen act, it was the final straw. It sparked these immediate and absolutely massive protests. The fuse was officially lit.
Now, this widespread anger, it didn't just fizzle out. Instead, it actually grew into one of the most remarkable nonviolent revolutions in modern history. And the person who led it? Totally unexpected.
And out of this absolute national tragedy stepped Corazon Aquino. Now, she wasn't some career politician. She was Ninoy's widow. But she became this incredibly powerful symbol of moral courage, this figure of integrity that the opposition desperately needed to rally behind. So when Marcos, in a move to reassert his power, called a snap presidential election, she stepped up to challenge him.
So this 1986 election, it was a total mess, a complete standoff. Marcos declared himself the winner, but Corazon Aquino, who had the backing of the people and independent observers, claimed the legitimate presidency. And why? Because there were reports everywhere of just massive, blatant voting fraud, allegedly by Marcos's supporters. The whole country was at a breaking point.
What happens next is, honestly, it's just incredible. It all unfolds in this whirlwind of 4 days. Aquino called for peaceful protests, and the people answered. You had millions of citizens just pouring onto the main highway in Manila, literally blocking the path of army tanks with their bodies, praying, handing flowers to soldiers. Then, the knockout blow. Key military leaders defected and withdrew their support for Marcos. The pressure was just too much. On February 25th, Marcos fled the country, and Corazon Aquino was sworn in as president. I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. Over 2 million people. This wasn't a military coup. This wasn't a violent uprising. This was just people power. It was a demonstration of sheer, peaceful, popular will on a scale that was absolutely impossible to ignore. A true victory for the people. But here's the thing. Winning a revolution, that's one thing. Actually governing a nation afterwards, that's a whole different ballgame. The story doesn't just end with Marcos flying away. That's actually where a new, really difficult chapter begins.
So President Aquino doesn't just get to celebrate. No, she inherits a country in total crisis. The communist insurgency was still a huge problem. The country was drowning in massive foreign debt. Poverty was everywhere. And on top of all that, she had the monumental task of rebuilding the democratic institutions that Marcos had spent 2 decades tearing down.
And all of this really leaves us with one big important question. The People Power Revolution is this incredible testament to the power of peaceful protest. But it's also a powerful reminder that overthrowing a dictator, well, that's just the first step. The long, hard work of actually building a stable, just, and prosperous democracy, that's what truly comes next.